Blessings of peace, love, and joy, my dear friends. I pray that you are well and that God is taking care of you as He always does. So it's good to be back and to continue this conversation of spirituality, or if you like, spiritual life. Now, spiritual life or spirituality is a very important subject. Not only is it important, but it is also a personal passion for me to have this conversation, because the greatest thing that ever happened to me was the day when my spiritual life, when my inner life was revived. When I felt something in me was tickled and touched in a way that I became awakened. That's the day when I think that I received my salvation. Because the day that I became a Christian, if you like, was a day of awakening. It was like I became aware. I gave an example in my book that what happened to me was like a light bulb came on. You know how you've been in darkness and then all of a sudden this light comes on. And when that light comes on, you get to see what's around you. You get to see what's in the room. You get to know what's going on. And that's what light does. And that's what happened to me when my light, or rather when I experienced that light, I became aware of myself. I became aware where I was. I saw my situation. I understood my predicament. That's what spirituality does. And even in my book that I wrote, I say that spirituality, every time you engage in spirituality or the subject itself, you are actually engaged in self-discovery of your identity. It is about self-identity, because the real you, the real you is not far away from you. The real you is within you. And there's so many times that we look out for things that we think will bring us joy and peace. And sometimes you think your peace is in the bank or where the money is, or where, we are always looking out, like searching for these things. But the real deal, the real thing that really matters to us is so close. In fact, so much within us. And that's really, to me, the importance of this subject of spirituality is because there's so much that is within that we haven't really unlocked, and we tend to look for so many things from everywhere else except from our own inner being. And so when you begin the journey of inquiring your inner life, that's the greatest journey you'll ever take. So I then discovered that my spirituality hosted me, my whole being, my real joy, my real values, my real peace was in addressing the man that was inside me. And even when God comes to us, you see, He's not coming in an empty vessel. He is coming to partner with someone inside of you. And that's how valuable spirituality is. because God is a spirit. So he is coming to work with another spiritual nature that is in us. And then also when the Holy Spirit came upon the early followers of Jesus Christ, he did not come to take over their lives. He came to partner with their spiritual lives. And that's why it is important to really recognize that part of spirituality is our own spirituality. Part of the broader the idea of spirituality is also ourselves. And I'm still say that every human being has a spiritual nature, as a spiritual being. And that spiritual being is not separate from our human nature. The spiritual nature is part of the human nature. Humans are spiritual by nature as much as they are physical. I'll repeat that human being, they are as much spiritual as they are not as they are human. So you can't really say I'm human only and ignore the other part of your being. Why am I saying that human beings are spiritual? It's because we have the capacity to understand spiritual concepts like God, or things that are spiritual. Human beings have the capacity to understand because there is a nature in us that identifies with spiritual nature. So God is not a total stranger to our nature. There is a part in us that identifies with nature. I mean, sometimes I look at sportsmen and they're going in to play a game, whether it's basketball or soccer, and they would make signs of the cross. They would look up. There's this recognition that there is some unseen presence that supports what I do or what you do or what I'll be doing. And so naturally, we are spiritual. Naturally, we are spiritual as much as we are physical. So we have these two natures in us. Our human nature includes the spiritual part. The spirituality is part of the human nature. And so I was saying that the greatest thing that ever happened to me was really to discover myself. And I've been incredibly supported in my life by my spirituality. My spirituality has been such a resource to me. If I need to be the happiest or the most peaceful or the most friendly or whatever, my spirituality plays a bigger part to that. So my spirituality has been such a great resource. There have been times in my life when I've been down and down to an extent that nobody could talk to me, or rather I would not hear anybody. But there's been this voice sometimes from within that tells me, get up and keep going. Stand up and dust yourself and go and walk. So my spirituality has been such a resource. I have a family, happily so. I have a wife, children, and friends, and all these things to me have not just showed up. They've come because of my spirituality. My spirituality led me to meet my wife. My spirituality helped me to be what I am today. And so it's a matter of life. And the Bible is right when it says that your gift will usher you before kings and or queens, meaning that if you nurture that gift, if you nurture that spiritual life, it will bring you in places of honor. It will take you places. It will feed you because it will connect you with talents and abilities, and it's spirituality is a resource, people. It's a resource. But you cannot get resources from what you've not invested in. There's a common saying back, back home, that you can't milk a cow that you do not feed. You just can't go to a cow and expect to get some milk and cheese and all that. You gotta do the first things first. You've got to feed the cow and fatten the cow so that now you have the right and the privilege of going to milk the cow. But you see, most of us, we want to milk a cow that has not that we have not fed. That's the same. Expecting your spiritual life to really support you when you haven't really fed it. You want your body to carry from point A to point B, but you must first make sure that your body is fit. That's really my contention, that things don't just happen. You must invest in it. Sometimes I look at where I am and what I've been through, the good and the bad. And every time it references me back to my spiritual life, because the more I am healthy spiritually, the more I am very resourceful, even physically. In other words, if your spirituality is really well resourced, it's well enriched. There are times when you're gonna go through challenges in life, but because you invested in that spirituality, it does help to keep you going. So spirituality is a very big subject. In fact, it's the subject, if you ask me, because that's what God really wants us to do. To first discover what He has invested in us as human beings. Remember, the human nature includes soil, which is the physical body, and the breath of God, the spirit that was breathed into the soil for it to become a living thing. And so we need to really be deliberate, intentional in making sure that our inner lives are well nourished. And then I like saying that if you take care of your spiritual life, it will take care of you. So when I became a Christian, all of a sudden I realized that I was living in a very challenging life. I grew up in a very, very I struggled in my life. My family was struggling at the time I was becoming a Christian. But the renewal of my inner life meant a lot because, like I said, I became aware of who I was. In the midst of my struggle, in the midst of my pain, in the midst of my shame, I became aware that God wanted me to be a minister or to do what I do. But really, and so it meant that I began to pray, I began to engage, and all that I was doing were spiritual practices. But from those spiritual practices, God began to open doors. Every part of my being began to receive blessings from my healthy spiritual life. My healthy spiritual life carried me through. I began to see the spiritual things impacting my physical life, my well-being, my wellness. And that's what I'm talking about, that your spirituality, the healthy of your spirituality, is a resource to the rest of your life and even beyond, because now I became a good son, a good brother. I became a resourceful member of the family, because it began from here, and from here unto here, and unto others that I encounter. I became a good friend. I became a good neighbor. So let's start from your own spirituality. And that's what I'm trying to drive this conversation, that first and foremost, let the light inside of you come alive. So when God comes to you, the first thing he wants to help you is to put the light on. And that light is your spirituality. Because then you're gonna realize that, hey, wait a minute, I am not as ordinary as I thought, or I'm not just this human being. You are a treasured vessel of God. You are a unique vessel of God. You are a vessel that God himself has loved with everlasting love. That's why he came for us. So I am just getting started, but I will be talking much more about how now do we begin to feed our spiritual life, because that's the big question that many people are asking me, that now, so how do I feed my spiritual life? How do I invest in my spiritual life? So again, as a matter of just getting the conversation going, spirituality is about your transcendent self, the part of you that transcends, the part of you that is that can go beyond your physical or mental limitation. The part of you that looks up and sees possibility. The part of you that can imagine things beyond what you can physically achieve. The part of you that can process spiritual concepts. And like I said, like God. The part of you that can understand God, and the part of you that can interact with God. And that's what spirituality deals with. But the core part of spirituality is self-discovery. Discovering who you are. What are your potential and what are your abilities? What are the things that the Holy Spirit is coming to set ablaze? Because he is not bringing something new. He is simply coming to set you on fire. The Holy Spirit is like bringing gas to the engine. But the engine must be in good shape. Your spirituality is like an engine, and that engine needs life, and that life is there. And when God comes, he comes to get it started, and that's really what happened. And since that time when my salvation, when my enlightenment came, I have been incredibly blessed. You see, I've gone through the ups and downs of life. I've gone through the fire. I've gone through the wilderness. I've gone through times of dryness, times of struggle and pain. But in those moments, if there is anything that carried me through, it's my spirituality. There are times when I found myself in places where I couldn't even face myself. I couldn't even understand myself. But my spirituality stood up for me. My spirituality got me going. My spirituality always had my back, when nobody talked to me, when nobody inspired me, my spirituality did. And that's why sometimes we have this talk about resilience or convictions or passion. It comes from the inner man. If the inner man is not up to it, there's just no way you can have inner energy. The inner energy, that's what people say. The inner energy is actually coming from the inner life. That you could be struggling, but the inner life is telling you, you can do this. You can go through this. You can get up and walk. You can stand and do it again. Because sometimes you can find yourself in a situation where you think your life is done. Your life is over. There are some times when I found myself in moments when I felt like I'm done, I'm out, it's over. But my spiritual life will tell me now, you haven't even started. So in other words, I have really found so much resource. And that's why I wrote my book. This book that I wrote, it's called Unwrapping the Greatest of Human Treasure. The human resource, the greatest human resource, very important. The greatest human resource is not out there. It is not in the bank. It is not with another. It is inside of you. So much that you can keep your money, but that would not stop the inner man from generating joy and peace and all the satisfaction. Or you can bring all the money, but if my inner life is broken, if my spirit is broken, if my spiritual life is in tatters, the money would not make any difference. It might give me, temporal pleasure, but not the real pleasure. And so let's keep the conversation. Next time I'll be going deep into it to talk about how do you resource your inner life, your spiritual life. That's what many people have been asking me. I've been kind of trying to delay a little bit, but we're going to talk much more about how do we now start unlocking that treasured life in us. God bless you, and I pray that God will bring an awakening in your spiritual life. When that inner man is awakened, it's like a giant that was sleeping. He will stand for you, and he will carry you to your destiny. God bless you. I'll talk to you again on how to begin the process of resourcing your inner life. Blessings again. All the best.